Vermont just became the first state to require big oil to pay up to make communities more resilient to climate change. It only takes one state for others to follow. Let's take a look at how they're doing it. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckosphere, where we talk about the climate crisis and clean energy transition. If those are interesting and important topics to you, hit that subscribe button below and ring the bell so you don't miss every time I post. Okay, straight up, that presidential debate knocked me on my ass for a sec.
Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives, but will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
Well, let me just go back to what he said about the police.
38 seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want absolutely immaculate clean water, and I want absolutely clean air, and we had it. We had H2O.
I guess that relates to climate change.
Ever, and we did.
Not true.
We were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything, and yet during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And
Incorrect.
My top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. I passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history.
That's true. The Inflation Reduction Act.
And by the way, black colleges. We're in a situation where the idea that he is claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water, he hadn't done a damn thing for the environment. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. I immediately joined it because if we reach 1.5 degrees Celsius at any one point, there's no way back. The only existential threat to humanity is climate change.
Woo.
And he didn't do a damn thing about it. He wants to undo all that I've done.
True.
The Paris Accord was going to cost us $1 trillion. And China nothing,
where the hell
and
does
Russia
that number
nothing,
come from?
And India nothing.
That's just not true.
It was a rip-off of the United States. And I ended it because I didn't want to waste that money because they treat us horribly. We were the only ones. It was costing us money. Nobody else was paying
That's
into
not true.
it. And it was a disaster. But everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down.
The idea is that we, in fact, we were the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. How can we do anything if we're not able to? The United States can't get its pollution under control. One of the largest polluters in the world, number one. We're making significant progress. By 2035, we will have cut pollution in half. We have made significant progress, and we're continuing to make progress. We set up a climate corps for thousands of young people to learn how to deal with climate.
True.
Like the Peace Corps, and we're moving in directions that are going to significantly change the elements of cause of pollution. But the idea that he claims that he has the biggest heart up here and he's really concerned about pollution and about climate, I've not seen any indication of that. And by the way, with regard to prescription drugs,
especially paired with the recent Supreme Court rulings. Oh, jeez. Anyways, with federal regulations in this country going to shit, it's more important than ever to focus on state and community-led initiatives. So today we're going to actually talk about a groundbreaking move recently made by the second smallest state in the country, Vermont. This East Coast state is no stranger to climate change-induced extreme weather events. Last year, it was hit by one of the many billion-dollar disasters that we saw in 2023. This one being overwhelming rain. In fact, they saw 2 months of rain fall in the span of 2 days. And for quick context, warmer air holds more moisture, about 7% per degree of warming. So that means that there's more water to drop at once when a storm happens. So that's what happened. Vermont will definitely experience something like this more often thanks to climate change. And that is something the state government currently cannot afford. And it shouldn't be on the citizens' tax dollars to make up for a problem that fossil fuel companies knew would happen but kept to themselves for 50 years. So a little over a month ago, the state's governor approved a new law by the General Assembly to form a new superfund superfund called the Climate Superfund Recovery Cost Program. Any fossil fuel company whose products have emitted more than 1 billion tons of greenhouse gases over the last 30 years, so that's from January 1st, 1995 to December 31st, 2024, will have to put money into this fund. The fund will be run by the state's Agency of Natural Resources, which will determine which companies fit this category. Some that are likely to fall into the category are the usual ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Shell. The Superfund will support state efforts to recover from extreme weather events and improve infrastructure resiliency. Now, if you're a veteran of this channel, or just focusing on climate change news like me, then you might immediately think, oh, this will get sued out of existence really fast. I mean, the American Petroleum Institute, Big Oil's main lobbying group, has already expressed its displeasure, saying in a letter to the Vermont House, quote, API is extremely concerned that the bill retroactively imposed costs and liabilities on prior activities that were legal, violates equal protection and due process rights by holding companies responsible for the actions of society at large, and is preempted by federal law. Additionally, the bill does not provide potentially impacted parties with notice as to the magnitude of potential fees that can result from its passage. So it's true that we actually don't know how much big oil companies would be charged to support the fund yet, though that's just because we don't have the information quite yet. So it'll be interesting to see how much the state feels is justified to charge these corporations. But allow me to rant for a sec about the part where they say that these companies are being held responsible for actions of society at large. Shifting the blame back on society as a whole is such a classic playbook move by the fossil fuel industry. After all, big oil invented the personal carbon footprint to make individuals feel responsible and guilty for climate change despite not knowing the impacts of fossil fuel consumption. It's not the individual's fault that the automotive industry allegedly killed the original electric vehicle or public transit, a legacy that the fossil fuel industry is trying to keep going to this day. It's also not the individual's fault that the fossil fuel industry has lobbied the federal government to ignore fracking's impact on local drinking water or how much methane the process spews into the atmosphere until like very recently. Maybe we would have preferred a different form of energy generation if we actually had all the information available decades ago, but I digress. The Vermont Agency of Natural Resources will release a feasibility report in January breaking down how the Superfund will get fed. Additionally, the state's treasurer and attorney general supports the plan, which was developed with the advice of many legal scholars. So state officials seem pretty confident that they can support the new law in court. In general, the concept of this fund isn't terribly different from federal superfunds made in the past to clean up environmental disasters. For example, in 1980, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency cracked down on companies dumping hazardous and toxic waste everywhere by creating the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. Along with the act, Congress approved a superfund to help states clean up around 50,000 hazardous and toxic waste dump sites around the country. Companies who transport and dispose the hazardous and toxic waste were responsible for paying into the superfund. Sound familiar? It didn't matter if they were technically deemed responsible for any particular disaster either. If there was a chance that their business could cause a disaster because it was working with toxic and hazardous waste, then it had to pay into the fund. This move helped clean up the country and reduce the likelihood of hazardous disasters happening in the future. Since it doesn't seem likely that the federal government will repeat something like this for climate change, states are taking it into their own hands. States like Massachusetts, New York, and California are eyeing what Vermont is doing and might do the same in the near future if Vermont can successfully fend off any litigation. So, what do you think of this strategy? Which state do you think would follow first if the Superfund sticks? I'm no lawyer, but I'm generally feeling pretty hopeful about this move because it's got some historical events to lean on. Do you agree? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section below. It's now time for a fun fact about Rue. So this summer was the first time that Rue unfortunately has experienced some hairball issues. I don't blame him. It's very hot. I would want to lose as much of the coat as possible. So I recently picked up a little hairball support thing, and he is a notoriously picky cat. But thankfully he actually seems to like this type, which is good. Oh, my knees. There you go. So I'll keep you posted on if that works. Also, some updates is the relationship between him and Tom have not really improved, though Tom does visit the downstairs more often now, and he also visits this office space because we removed plants from here because he likes deep plants. So we're just, you know, taking it one step at a time. And that was a fun fact about Rue. Until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news and environmental organizations. Thank you to the people on Patreon who help support me and my fur baby Rue. A special shout out to the climate confident and courageous David H., Paul B., Phil Plasma, Dan Morton, Specker, Breezy, Deanne, Kevin Morton, SKP Joe's Course Gold, and Gary Stark. I greatly appreciate your support of $5 or more. If you would like to support the work I do, please check out the Patreon and buy me a coffee, links in the description below for reoccurring or one-time payments. Bye for now.